this to your website, you're putting a little block of JavaScript code on the pages of your website. And what this does, sorry about that, is it basically then starts to anonymously track website visitors, which Google Analytics calls users, and it just tracks what they're doing on your site. So things like how long are they spending there, what pages are they visiting. It just gives you a sense of everything that's happening on your website with all of your visitors. Just so that you know, if someone doesn't have JavaScript turned on, it means that they won't be tracked. So this just means that there's literally no way, this is the only way to kind of really hide yourself when you're online, but it also means if you have JavaScript turned off, most websites wouldn't even necessarily work for you because most of them require JavaScript to actually load everything properly. So for the most part, it should be tracking your users. Literally the only way to not be tracked at all is with JavaScript. There's also things you should be aware of. Obviously now I think we all see like cookies and tracking notices on websites, and you're allowed to pick and choose. So as time goes on, we may see that less people are being tracked because this is something that's coming up. But right now, for the most part, because it's also all anonymous, most people are being tracked, which is why it's about 95 to 99% accurate. So definitely if you're looking to make some decisions and just have some reasonable understanding of what's going on your website, this is a really good tool to use. So, like I said, I'm not going to go through this and walk you through, but I just want to talk about what you need to do if you're not already using Google Analytics, what you have to do to get it set up. So the first step that you'll need to do is just sign up for a free account at analytics.google.com. And if you have a Gmail account or something like that already, it'll make it even more seamless. Then the next step is what you do have to do is actually connect your website to Google Analytics. So it doesn't know just because you have an account what your website is and what it's tracking. So what you're going to need to do, and this part, what I often suggest is if you're working with a developer on your website, just get them to do this for you. This will be super easy for them. They'll know exactly what to do. And let's say you're using something like WordPress, there's also some plugins that will do this work for you. But basically overall, so that you have an understanding of how these two get connected, when you go into Google Analytics, there's an admin section, which we're going to spend a little time in this evening. And when you go under the property tab, you'll click into tracking info and you'll see that there's a tracking code there. So basically that tracking ID, or there's also a global site tag. What you need to do is you need to add that code to your website so that within the code of the site at the very top, it just tracks every page that's on your site. So that's why people use the global site tag, because basically it means you don't have to go in and tag every page separately. It will just track everything for you. Once again, like I said, I build websites all the time. Most of the time I'm using WordPress. I am not a developer. So most of the time if I'm working with a developer, I just have them do all of this in the setup piece, and it's super easy and seamless for them. If not, you can also go into the reference guide. There are how-to links in there. There's lots of how-to videos out there so that you can do this as easily as possible yourself if you don't work with a developer as well. And once again, if you're using WordPress, there's some really great plugins, so you can just search on there, download one of the well-rated plugins and use that as well. And also just to note, it does take 24 hours for reports to start generating in Google Analytics. So when you first set your account up, you need to set it up and then basically give it at least a day to start collecting information. So what you'll see is that Google does do real-time tracking, but it needs at least 24 hours worth of data to actually start generating any sort of reports. So you just want to get it set up, take a little break, and then come back a day or two later and you'll start to see that it's collected data for you. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hop out quickly and I will open up Google Analytics. So basically, I'm just using you'll see some data for the Camp Tech account. So the Camp Tech website, we're just going to use this so that I can actually show you some real data, show you all the reports with some real information in them. But basically, when you log into Google Analytics with your login, it will take you to the home page, which is this page right here. It's going to show you basically just some top line analytics. And then what you'll do is you'll go into the admin. And what I'm going to show you is how to create some, just kind of do some of the basic configurations at the beginning. The one thing I do want to say is that none of what I'm about to show you right now is anything that's going to kind of make or break. If you just set up your account and started looking at your reports 24 to 48 hours later, totally okay, but we're just going to show you a couple of tricks so that you configure the account to make sure that your data is as accurate as humanly possible. So the other thing I want to say is that if you're following along right now and you don't see all of the columns that I see here and that I'm showing you here, what might be happening is that you might not have total administrative access. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to go back and whoever owns the account, if you're working with something that someone else has already set up. So if you set up your own account, you'll automatically be an admin. But if somebody else set this up at some point and you've just kind of taken this over, or you want to dig into the data, you may not be set up as full admin, and that might be why you're not seeing everything that I'm seeing here. So if for whatever reason you're following along on your own right now and you don't see everything, please just keep following what I'm doing. You'll be able to go back to the PDF reference guide for notes. But basically, you just need to go back, get full admin access, and then you'll be able to go through and do all the things that I'm about to show you. So I'm going to hop back and forth a little bit here. So bear with me. But what I'm going to show you right now is just how to make a new view under the admin section. And the reason why you might want to do this is sometimes you want to filter the data specifically, so you just want to look at certain things. If you create a new view, this will allow you to change some of your settings and just configure it for you. You'll always have the initial, all of the data, but really what this view is just kind of setting some lenses. So sometimes after you've gotten really comfortable with Google Analytics, you might want to kind of have a couple different views and you can just go into them, see what you need to see within each of those really quickly and get out. So yeah, just want to make sure that you know what all of this is about. So just to explain the column layout here, basically, this is the overall account. The reason why this column exists is that you can also be an administrator of more than one account. So if I go up here, you'll see I have a bunch of accounts to choose from, and that's because I'm an admin of a bunch of accounts. So let me get out of that menu. So on the left-hand side, that's the top level, that's your account. Then under your account, even, you can have more than one property. So that would be if someone maybe has more than one website or something, but all under one account. And then the detailed is the actual view. So you'll see right now that I'm already in a view that's called bot an internal IP filter. And that's basically just a name we've given this view to say that right now what we're doing is we're filtering out any bots that might be hitting the site because we know that those aren't really real potential customers or clients. So we don't really care about bot traffic. And we're also filtering out our own internal IPs. So basically what that means is, let's say you or any of your team members, whatever network and devices you're on, you want to filter yourself out. So you're not counting your views of your website and what you're doing on your website as part of your data. So once again, if you don't go to your website all the time, this honestly could be a step that you skip. We just want everyone to know that this is something that generally, when you set up an account, it's something, we'd recommend doing. And that's really just so that you have the cleanest data possible. So what I'm going to show you here is that you can also just go in and create a new view. So if I wanted to filter this for another reason, I can just go in, I would give it a name, I would choose whatever time zone I wanted so that it's tracking at the time that I live in, and then you would just hit create view. I'm not going to bother creating a new one now, but that's literally all you do. And then you just start to configure some things. So what I'm going to do in this view that we've already created is I'm going to show you some of the settings. So basically, you can see this is what we named it. It's our time zone. And basically what we've done is you can see in here that it's checked off that we're going to exclude all hits from known bots and spiders. So basically anytime you create a new view, and even your initial view, Google will automatically check that. But it's just good to go in and see. I've been working with a client for a while now, and I didn't even think about it because this is normally just automatically checked off. And I was looking at their traffic and I saw there was some really big spikes, and I realized that chances were it was probably because we weren't filtering out any bot and spider traffic, and sure enough, I was right. So you just want to go into the settings in whatever view, even if it's your default view, and just double check that is checked off. Because bot traffic, once again, it's useless to you. It's not real people. Google normally figures them out really quickly. So sometimes you'll see a weird spike in your traffic. It could be from a country that you don't expect. And then you'll notice that it goes away. And that generally means it's because Google's figured them out and it's now excluding any traffic from those bots or spiders. So yeah, basically that is just so that you can see these are kind of the top line settings in any given view. So now, just for a second, I'm going to jump back. And let's go. I already went through this already. I kind of always do those all at once. And like I said, just double check. It's actually default ticked off, but make sure it's there. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to add filters. So the IP address thing that I was talking about, that's basically within your view, you can add a filter. And basically it'll give you some choices. There's a bunch of different things, but really the one that you want to pay attention to is just the IP address. So let me just go back to my browser here. What I'm also going to show you is, hold on, just going to go back a step. So see in this, under the view menu here, you see filters. I'm going to click on that. It's just taking a second. Apparently my internet is a little slow right now. And you'll see that currently there's a couple of IP addresses that have already been filtered out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my IP address to this as well. In case you don't know, in order to find your own IP address, all you have to do is go to Google and say, what is my IP? Maybe if I typed properly. And and you'll see right here, because that's the publicly available address. All I have to do now is copy this. So Control C, go back to the analytics window, and then what I'm going to do is hit Add Filter. So here we go. Basically, I can just apply this to the existing one because we know there's an IP filter there already. Oh, and I think I've probably given, oh, there's something weird happening here. Hold on. I need to refresh my screen for a second. Bear with me. Okay. So now we're going to choose, in this drop down here, we're just going to choose, we want to filter out internal IP addresses. There we go. And, oh, wow. I don't know what is happening, but it is not loading my page. Hold on. Let me get out of here. Sorry, guys. Technical difficulty. Let's see. We'll discard this. I actually think my, oh yeah, strange. It's not showing my whole screen. So my IP address, I've done this before. It's already excluded. So I will just show you in here. You can see when you go in, it'll let you choose exclude. Traffic from IP addresses is what you'll select, and then that are equal to, and then there should be a box here where I can add this in. Hold on. I don't know what's happening, but for some reason, it is not loading the whole page. Okay. I'm gonna try and reload this whole thing. Let's see if it works. Very sorry. I honestly don't know what's happening. Let me just stop sharing for a second and go back. Okay. I don't know why it's showing it. Basically, all you have to do is you will choose exclude, you'll choose internal IP addresses, and then all you'll have to do is copy and paste your IP address from what it showed you in Google, and then you'll hit save. You can also give it a name so that you know exactly whose IP address it is. And then all you'll do is save it. It will automatically exclude your own traffic then. And just bear in mind, in terms of IP addresses, if you are on a different network at home and at the office, you'll want to do that in both places. Because it's based on your network connection as well. And then obviously if you have team members who would be on your site regularly, you would just have them do the same thing. So yeah, that's basically that. Hopefully I can get my screen to, my Google Analytics screens to load properly after this. I might just try a different browser if I have to. But once again, this is all in the PDF. You'll just follow those steps, hit exclude traffic from the IP addresses. You can put in multiple ones and then hit save. And from that point forward, when you're in that view, you will always have those filtered out. So your traffic will definitely not be in the numbers. Once again, like I said from the beginning, if for whatever reason the step feels confusing or you're not quite sure about it, if you skip this, it's not going to be that big a deal. It just means that all of your traffic to your site will be included in your numbers too, but I would suspect that that shouldn't be that much. Just want you to know, because this is kind of best practice, because that way you know all of your data is customers, clients, potential customers or clients. So now let's talk about just Google Analytics data and what it is tracking for you. So basically, by default, if you do kind of no special configurations, it will automatically track what's happening in real time. So you'll see when we go back into Google Analytics that there is a tab that literally just shows you real time. Is there anyone on your website right now? What country are they located in? That kind of stuff. It's not something that most of us pay that much attention to unless you're trying to drive traffic at a specific time and a whole bunch of people. But it's one just, depending, let's say you had a really big launch at like 10 a.m. on a specific day and you were trying to get a bunch of people to your website at the same time, you might pay attention to that one. But otherwise, it's one that normally most of us kind of skip through. It's also going to track information about the audience. So who's visiting your website. I just want to let you know that it's not going to give you email addresses or specific information. This is just like anonymous numbers of, how many users are they coming back more than once? And that's all just tracked using like anonymous cookies. Then it will also give you some information about acquisition. And that basically is just how did they get to your website? Did they just type in the URL? Did they come from Google? Did they come from a social media post and they clicked through on a link? Or maybe they came through an email. So it's just going to give you some information about where that traffic is coming from. And then the other thing, and it's always a really interesting one, is just the behavior. So what are they doing on your website? What pages are they visiting? What's the most popular? Google Analytics also has a section called conversions. And what that will do is track specific goals for your website, but you have to configure it, and it's a bit complicated. So we're not going to go through that this evening. Just want you to know that that does exist. And if you get, really well-versed in Google Analytics, or maybe you're working with a developer or someone who knows it really well, then they could potentially help you set up some actual conversion tracking. So things like how many people sign up for a newsletter, or if you have an account system on your website and people need to sign up and then log in, you could track some of those actions. So those aren't built in with just the basics, but it can be configured for in the future. So after all of that preamble, before we start to get into the fun of all the reports, I just want to say right now, we're going to give away two or three ebooks for Avery Swartz's See You on the Internet. So you can check in the chat window, and Hema's going to let the lucky winners know. Even if you don't happen to be lucky enough to win, I have this book myself, and this is what I do for a living, but it's a really great book that sort of walks you through all of the key realms of digital marketing that will help you as a small business owner. It's really well written, it's easy to follow, so to the people who win, you're very lucky, and everybody else, you may just want to check that out anyway. So I will let you guys continue with that in the chat window, and what I'm going to do is just get started on digging into the key reports. So there's a lot more than just what I'm going to show you this evening that Google Analytics can show you and tell you, but I'm going to go through the main ones that should cover off of pretty much everything you could ever need. They're the ones that I go back to most regularly as well. And I use this pretty much day in and day out. So the first thing I'm going to tell you, and this is just a point before I jump back into Google and hopefully my windows are loading properly, the very first thing you want to remember is when anytime you get into Google Analytics, it automatically just gives you the last week of data. But the first step you want to take, if you don't want to see that week and you want to see some other range of time, that you need to set the timeline. So once you set the timeline, you can jump around in reports, but it's really important that you remember when you go in actually do have to set that up. So I will jump back in. Hopefully, once we're into the reports here, everything will load properly. I'm going to show you quickly what real time looks like. Even though, like I said, this isn't one that most of us use very often. As you can see, this is Camp Tech website, and right now there's no one there. Otherwise, there'd be a number here, and it would kind of fill in parts of the map, depending on where your visitors were from. So, just want to give you a little bit of the lay of the land. Down the left, which is where I found the admin menu as well, that's where, oh look, there's someone on the Camp Tech site right now, fancy. This is where all the reports live. So they're all kind of accordions because they have like different, within the main reports, there are different things you can look up. So what you can do is just sort of open them up, see the different smaller reports that fall under the overview. The overview is almost always where I hit first for every single one of these reports. And then you can just close it up and move on to the next one. So just wanted to show you that because this will just help you. I realize that when you get into analytics, sometimes it's just a bit overwhelming. Now I feel like everyone on this webinar is going on the Camp Tech site or something. I love it, love it. So let me go into what is kind of the number one report. It's the one I always start with. And that is you go into audience and you hit overview. So I will show you when we're in this what I mean about setting the date. So obviously real time is real time. You don't have to worry about the date. But just like this left-hand menu helps you navigate all your reports, up here in the right-hand corner is kind of all the other stuff that you're going to access regularly. So like I said, Google's default is to give you the last week's worth of data. And it does it a day before today because that data is complete. You can also see if you include today that the numbers will change. It does track throughout the day, but Google likes to show you complete numbers, which is why it gives you like the week before today. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm also gonna show you a couple other tricks about setting the dates. So what you'll see here is automatically when I open it up, it starts with the start date and it highlights that. And then you can click over and change the end date. So right now, you'll see I could choose whatever I want. For our purposes, what I'll do this evening is I'll probably give us like 3 full months of data. So I'm gonna see this is the start of the date range. I'm in December 2020. I'm gonna click on December 1st. And then instead of going up till today, let's just do 3 complete months. So my end date is going to be February 2021. So that's 3 full months. The other neat thing I want to show you here is that you can also click off the compare to, and you can compare it to specific dates. So if I wanted to compare this week to last week, I could go in and just pick those date ranges. If I want to compare February to January, I can go in and pick those date ranges. What it'll also do, the default, is compare it to the previous period. So it'll take the exact like 80 days, 90 days, whatever that is, previous to the dates you've selected, and it'll show you both. So I'm gonna apply this just so that you guys can see what it does for you when you check off the compare. So you'll see here, it's basically giving me September, it likes picking the exact same number of days, so you might want to go in and change that to September 1st, but for this it doesn't matter. What I want to show you is that you can see here that it's giving you kind of 2 colored lines, and it's showcasing in all of these little charts what the differences in the numbers are. So this will just allow you to really quickly and visually get a bit of a snapshot between one period and another period. So you'll also see here, there's a really big difference from December to end of February in return visitors. So the 3 months previous to that, it was almost all visitors who only came once, versus in the last 3 months, there were a bunch of people that came back more than once. So, and then things like, look, user numbers are way up. There's a whole bunch of new users. So you'll also see that Google very nicely does things in green and red. So numbers that are considered good are in green, and then where things have decreased, they're in red. So basically, this will just allow you, sorry, you lost me in the corner here. I'm not sure how I did that. Probably closed it by mistake. This will just allow you to really quickly every now and then, if you want to start to see some trends, or you want to compare your summer to the fall, you'll be able to go in and play around and just very quickly see what was one time period versus another. You can also go in, once you've got enough data, and compare 1 year to another year. So this can just be a really helpful tool, and you don't have to do all the math and record everything yourself. It'll just give you all the averages and all the numbers. So just a good thing to remember, I'm going to take us out of the compare function, and we'll just look at the data from December 1st to Feb 28th, and I'll give you guys a little bit of insight on the audience report. So we're going to turn that off, hit apply. I can't stress enough, if you ever are in here and you're looking at the numbers and they just seem really wrong, step 1, go up to the date range and make sure that you've got the date range in there. I can't tell you enough times. So many times I'll look at something and I'm really confused. It seems off. And then when I go and look at the date range, I'm like, okay, that's why. So just keep that in mind. So what I'll do, and I'm just going to jump back for a minute here to the slides, and just kind of walk through quickly before I get back. These are the phrases that you're just going to want to remember, the names that Google calls everything. So, and if you're using different tracking software, you might, or you've used different tracking software in the past, you might realize that it's different. Like some other ones call them visitors, Google calls them users. New website visitors or unique visitors, they call them new users. The number of website visits, Google calls those sessions. So that's just the absolute total number of times people came to the site. Then there's also the number of web pages visited, and that's what pretty much all of us call page views. So that could mean that someone comes to your site and they only visit once, they don't come back, but they visit 3 pages while they're there. So you'll get a sense of the total number of visits, but also the total number of pages that people are navigating to when they're on your site. Then also an important one is actually time spent on the website. And Google just calls that average session duration. So that's one certainly you could pay attention to, and depending on what your site is for, you might want to work on keeping people longer potentially. And then this is the one that it feels a little bit confusing, but basically it's tracking the percent of people who left your website after only looking at one page. So maybe they landed on your homepage and left, or they clicked a link from somewhere else to one of your pages and they left. What that is called is bounce rate, because basically it means they just kind of dipped into your site and got out. They didn't move around your site at all. I do also want to note that you can also explore kind of demographics, location, language preference, and what technology your website visitors are using. But usually most of that is a little less useful unless you have a very specific reason to look at those things. So I'm just going to give you guys some insight. So like I said, here's users, here's new users. So those are the people that basically those are kind of unique, And then clearly there were some users that came back. There's also the total number of sessions, which is over 9,000, but page views are up at 12,000. So basically you can see that most people on average are going to more than one page. You can also, the average number of sessions per user is 2.75. And the average session duration here is 31 seconds. So I know everyone's going to want to potentially ask, like, where should that be? What's good? What's bad? Really, it depends on what your site is all about. You know, if it's something that people, like things like for session duration and bounce rate, you know, if you're a site where you're just getting people to click in, watch a short video, or read a short bit of content, and then they leave, those numbers could be totally normal. So basically what I want you guys to think about is, A, you need to look at more than just, say, 1 week or 1 month or a couple weeks of data. You want to look at trends over time and start to look at things and make decisions. Because sometimes, too, you'll just see there's a weird spike 1 month. And it could just be based on what content you put out or what's going on in the world. But if you see something that's trending over a longer period of time, then you might want to dig into this and say, okay, how can I improve this? What could we do differently? So something like bounce rate, let me talk a little bit about that. So for the most part, everyone wants to know what's a good bounce rate. And really, really broad terms, I would say anywhere kind of between 40 to 70% is quite standard and can be very good depending on what your business is. And the reason why I say that is, so something like a news site, right? We all click through really quickly, say from Facebook, or we see something somewhere, we click through, we read it, and we leave, right? So for the most part, their bounce rates are going to be really high. It doesn't mean they're not getting really good traffic and people aren't coming back regularly, but when they do come, they consume one thing and they leave because they came there with a singular purpose. However, if you have, say, an e-commerce site and you want people to browse your store and hopefully put a bunch of things in your cart, and you want them, you know, to move around the site, but your bounce rate's really high, that generally means, okay, what can you do differently so that when they land on your site, they're more enticed to stay? So really, it's sort of taking all of these numbers. You need to collect data over some time, at least 3 to 6 months, I would say, to really then start making some decisions. You may notice some things right away that you're like, okay, what can I do to fix this? And maybe you've been looking at some of the data for a while already, if you already have analytics installed. But I would say, like, it's never about making rash decisions based on one data point or another. You sort of want to look at everything all together and take a look at what the trends are and then say, okay, what are the kinds of things I could maybe do to fix that or make that better? So if you want people to stay on your site longer, are you giving them compelling content to keep them there, right? So if you've got a lot of great blog posts and they're a little bit longer, then maybe they'll stay there longer and read them. And maybe on the side you have an archive, so they'll hopefully click through and read something else. So there's all sorts of little tips and tricks that you can employ. It's really about sort of looking at this data over a period of time and seeing what those trends are, and then zeroing in on the things that you want to fix that can hopefully also help you meet your goals. So this, like I said, this is like the main report. It's the one that pretty much 95% of the time when I'm coming to Google Analytics for myself, for clients, this is the page I start with, just because it gives you like a really good overview of what's going on. And these are kind of the key data points that everyone wants to know about. So I would just say, you know, make sure you take a look at the date range. figure out, like, I want to go month by month and sort of look at what those months look like. You'll also see here, I'll show you, if I just look at 1 month on its own, you'll see that everything is a bit bigger. So you can literally see every day those spikes, like everything's a little bit more clear. So you might also want to go in and sort of look month by month, as well as looking at a 3 to 6 month period as well. So yeah, that's just so that you're familiar. I will show you down here those other data points that I shared as well. So it defaults to language. Basically, this is just the, like, whatever someone's, like, keyboard and browsers and stuff are set to. So some of us, it's just the default is US. Do we really care about Great Britain versus Canadian? Anyway, clearly you can see it's primarily English. You'll also see that you can go into country. So apparently in February, there was some big traffic from the US on the Camp Tech site for whatever reason. And then you can also dig down into city. You'll see here that not set shows up. That generally means Google just can't figure it out. It doesn't know. I would also say that some of these you got to take with a grain of salt, just because IP addresses and their exact locations aren't exact. And sometimes someone could be on a network that's actually using, like, or their servers are based in the US. So sometimes this gets a bit messy. So just bear in mind that this information is helpful, but definitely the geographical part is not as exact as some of us would like. In terms of the system, basically this will just tell you what are the most popular browsers that people are using to go to your site. It'll also tell you operating systems. Really, this stuff is only, like, important. Let's say if you were going to do a website redesign and you want to make sure that you're appealing to and your site works for as many of your users as possible, it's helpful for developers to know this information. But for the most part, otherwise, it's not really something that we dig into often. This will also help let you know just kind of who's on desktop and who's on mobile. And there's also things like service provider, but most of the time it can't even track that. So I never pay attention to that at all. So basically, like I said, it's like my favorite report. It's the one I kind of live in the most. And it really gives you that top line look of what's going on my site, how many people are coming, how long are they staying. Just gives you a good snapshot of what's going on your site. So before I jump to the next report, I will answer one question here. And that is, can you explain what it means when Google crawls a site? So basically, Google, in order to pull all of the results into their search engine, what they have is, like, I guess, spiders, and it's not like a set schedule, but what Google does is basically just goes out and crawls or indexes your site. So let's say you make some changes on your site, or maybe if you're SEO savvy, you, like, change your meta description so that Google will say something different about you in the description when your search result shows up. Basically what Google does is those spiders kind of crawl and recrawl so that any changes that have happened on all the websites out there have then been accounted for. So that if people are searching for things, it's always up to date. So that's basically all it is. Like, normally when you add some new content or you update a meta description, you hope that Google is going to crawl. Usually it's within a couple days. All of that stuff will show up. If you've done everything correctly and your site is kind of optimized for everything. So you'll start to see, if you go back to Google and search for the same things, that, like, your description is changed. And that's because Google has recrawled your site and it's pulled the new information and replaced the old information. And really that comes from, just like I said, it wants to be current, wants to make sure that everyone's getting the information they're actually searching for as quickly as possible. So that's why it does that. Okay, so let's talk about report number 2. And that is what's called the acquisition report. So we're also going to start with the overview of this one. And basically what this is going to tell you is where's the website traffic coming from. So are people coming directly? They know the URL, maybe they have it bookmarked, they can come straight there. Is it organic search? So did they go onto Google and technically Bing or one of the other search engines, but really we're all using Google. Was there a referral? So what a referral is, let's say that you did a really great blog post and somebody else linked to it from their website. So that basically Google Analytics will track those clicks from other websites to your site. That's why things like links from other sites are really, really valuable because A, it's going to drive traffic, but it's a way for you to actually see that traffic is coming through from other places. So you'll be able to kind of measure what's going on. In terms of other ways, social media. So if people click a link from any of the main social media channels, Google can track that too. And then there's also email. So if you've got email marketing going on and you have links inside your emails, it can track that as well. And you'll have analytics in your email software too, but this way you can also see it